It's time for the podcast. Yeah, the podcast is starting.
What's a podcast?
It's all gonna be alright in the end. It's gonna be alright. And if you've got some worries, my dear little friends, please rest your busy minds, because it's finally time for stories from now and then.
Hi kids, welcome back to Stories from Now and Then. My name is Captain Blunderface, and I'm here with Deprecatus in the old library. And actually, we have a very special guest today. My grandpa, Admiral James T. Blunderface, is visiting here in the library. Say hi, Grandpa.
Hello to you, little ones. It is I, Admiral Blunderface, and I have come to help my grandson with the cast of pods.
That's the podcast, yes.
That's what I said. Now, welcome, children, to Stories from Then and Now.
It's actually now and then.
From now and also then, aboard the good ship library, where we keep old ancient scrolls of meaning.
Well, I think we are talking about books and stories, right?
In my day, we had to announce the cast of pods 3 times to the crew, so you could hear over the wind and the cannons and...
Grandpa, we don't have any cannons or anything like that here.
Well, yes, I can see that. I'm looking right at the cannons and they are not there. There's a cat aboard.
Yeah, that's Deprecatus.
Strange name, and yet I have sailed with stranger crew. Aye, Deprecatus, I know what you mean. Now, where was I? Today, we have for you a story. A true story, 100% true. And before
Actually, Grandpa, that's going to be next week. This is the story of Odysseus Part 3, so it's not exactly...
My boy, every story's true, but only some stories actually took place. Now, give them a good old hearty shout-out, will ye?
Of course, Grandpa. Well, today's episode is dedicated to Micah in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Micah is 9 years old and says hi to all of us here and everybody out there listening to the show. Micah, this one is for you. Oh, and it looks like we just got a message from our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Guest Getter. They help restaurants bring in guests and keep them coming back, which is great because I personally forget where I like to eat unless someone reminds me. Guest Getter helps restaurants do that, but on purpose. Check them out. GuestGetter.co.
Our sponsors. In my day, we were sponsored by the sea.
And with that, we're going to pass it off to Nicola for today's story. Take it away.
Okay, here we go. It's part 3, the final part of the Odyssey. Where did we leave things last time? Yes. We left Odysseus drifting about in the ocean on a makeshift raft, with no ships left and none of his men left with him. Poor Odysseus, he must be very lonely, very cold, and very hungry. So what happens next? Well, after 9 days of Odysseus drifting in the ocean, he washed up on the island of Ogygia, where a nymph named Calypso lived. Calypso was lovely. She was very kind and very beautiful, and she lived in a cave surrounded by grapevines and singing birds. She liked Odysseus. She wanted him to stay forever and be her husband, and she even offered to make him a god so he would never grow old. But Odysseus didn't want to be a god. He wanted to go home and be with his queen Penelope. Every day he sat on the beach and looked at the horizon and cried. He stayed on that island for 7 long years. Finally, the gods felt sorry for him. They sent Hermes to tell Calypso to let him go. So she gave him a bronze axe, and Odysseus built a raft. He was a man who knew his way around a piece of timber, and soon he was sailing away again. But the sea god Poseidon saw him. "Still trying to get home, are you?" he rumbled. He sent a great storm that smashed the raft to bits. Odysseus had to swim for 2 days and 2 nights until he reached the shore of Phaeacia. He was found by a princess named Nausicaa, who was down at the river washing her laundry. She was a very kind girl, and she took him to see her father, the king. The Phaeacians were wonderful sailors, and when Odysseus told them his whole story, they were so impressed that they decided to get him home using a special ship that could sail itself. The ship sailed him all the way to Ithaca while he was fast asleep and left him on the sand. When Odysseus woke up, he was lying on the beach of his own island. He was home. After 20 years, 10 years of war and 10 years of wandering, he was finally home. But Odysseus wasn't in the clear yet. There were more than 100 men lounging around his great hall, eating his food, drinking his wine, and making a terrible mess. These were the suitors, men who thought Odysseus was dead and were all asking Penelope to choose one of them as her new husband. Odysseus decided to disguise himself as a beggar and quietly sit in his own palace. Nobody even glanced at the old beggar who sat down quietly in the corner. But Odysseus saw everything. He saw the suitors being rude and wasteful. He saw his own servants being ordered around. And then Penelope appeared at the top of the stairs. Even after 20 years, even though she looked tired and sad, she was still the most beautiful woman Odysseus had ever seen. "I have made my decision," Penelope announced. "I will marry the man who can string the great bow of Odysseus and shoot an arrow through the holes of 12 axe heads lined up in a row." The servants brought out Odysseus's massive bow, and they set up 12 axe heads in a long row, each one with a hole through the blade. "Let me try," said the suitors, and one by one, more than 100 suitors tried to string the bow. They wheezed and grunted. They tried every trick they could think of, but not one of them could bend that bow even the tiniest bit. Then Odysseus, still looking like an old beggar, stood up. "Let me try," he said. The suitors roared with laughter. "You, an old beggar? If we can't do it, what makes you think you can?" Odysseus took the bow in his hands. He ran his fingers along the wood, checking for cracks, feeling the familiar weight of it. He knew every curve of it. Then, as simply as if he were picking up a feather, Odysseus bent the great bow and put the string on as easily as you can tie your shoes. Odysseus picked up an arrow, drew back the string, and let it fly. Whoosh! The arrow sailed straight through the holes of all 12 axe heads, one after another, without touching the blades. Then Odysseus threw off his ragged disguise. He stood tall and strong, looking like a king again. A king who had been to war and survived monsters and sailed across endless seas. "I am Odysseus," he declared, "and this is my house." Odysseus drove the suitors from his palace. Some fled into the night. Some tried to fight, but were no match for the battle-tested hero. By evening, not one suitor remained. Finally, the palace was quiet. Finally, it was Odysseus's home again. But Penelope had waited 20 years. She had heard false news so many times, men claiming to be Odysseus, or claiming to have seen him, or claiming he was definitely dead. She wasn't going to be fooled, even by someone who looked exactly like her husband and could string his bow. She came down the stairs slowly. "If you are truly my husband," she said, "then you won't mind sleeping in the guest room tonight. I'll have the servants move our big bed out of our bedroom for you." Odysseus's face changed. "Move the bed?" he cried, suddenly upset. "Move our bed? But that's impossible. Don't you remember? I built that bed myself 20 years ago, before I left for the war. I built it around the trunk of an old olive tree that grows right through the floor of our bedroom. The bedpost is a living tree with its roots going deep into the earth. No one can move that bed unless they cut down the whole house." Penelope's eyes filled with tears of joy. Only the real Odysseus could know the secret of how their bed was made. She ran down the stairs and into his arms. They held each other and cried and laughed and talked all through the night, sitting by the fire, telling each other everything that had happened during their 20 years apart. And so the man who was as slippery as an eel and as clever as a fox was finally back in his own house, back with the people he loved most in all the world. They lived happily for many more years. Odysseus never ate another lotus flower, never poked another giant in the eye, and never took the long way home again. I'm so glad that Odysseus finally made it home, and so glad that he could be reunited with his Queen Penelope. Adventures can be wonderful and so exciting, but they can also be very tiring. And sometimes, after a long day of adventuring, I know that I just want to be in my own home with people I know and love. Perhaps it's all about finding that right balance. How long you can go away and adventure, and how much time you need to rest at home between your adventures. What about you? Do you think you could adventure for 10 years, 20 years? Or do you think you would get too homesick? What about you, Captain? Do you think you could be adventuring for years and years? Or do you think you would miss home too much?
Well, that is a great question. I think my maximum adventure time has got to be 3 years. But that also sometimes a 3-day adventure can feel like too much. So I think it depends on where and when. What about you, Grandpa? What did you think?
Arr, my boy, that was one of the truest stories ever spoken.
Nice.
Children, if you enjoyed this cast of pods, write it down and throw it to sea in a bottle.
Wait, Grandpa. They actually would want to message us on Instagram at Stories From Now and Then, and they could get a shout out on a future episode. The bottle would just get lost at sea. Right, Deprecatus?
Aye, Deprecatus, you say so much with such short utterances. My grandson here could learn a thing or two from you while he hosts this cast of pods in the Good Ship Library.
Stories From Now and Then is narrated by Nicola Ward, music by Captain Blunderface. Captain Blunderface played by Evan Wiebe, and James T. Blunderface played by Brennan Sharrow. And Deprecatus, Well, Deprecatus, honestly, it seems like you're taking my grandpa's side when it comes to some of these podcast opinions, and I think the three of us should maybe just get
Stories from now and then.